We are officially live, and I want to first of all apologize to those of you who are joining now. And I did not necessarily give a formal uh, event notification, so my apologies for that. So with that being said, I am not sure what the turnout is going to look like. But nevertheless, I did promise that I would make an attempt at uh, making it my priority to do this Freedom Friday. So nevertheless, I know that at least some of you who already know about it were already looking forward to it. I'm an hour later than I anticipated, mainly because I was hoping to have a guest with me. Unfortunately, I'm not sure how that's going to work out because this particular person is still at a job site and I haven't heard back from him since then. Nevertheless, I want to welcome each and every one of you who are going to be joining here fairly soon, I'm hoping. And we'll be on our way. The topic of discussion will be on the cost of freedom. At least that's where I'm hoping that this particular discussion goes. In our previous week, last Friday, when we were talking about Freedom Friday, the main topic was one of Lieutenant General Kelly's articles that he wrote a number of years ago called 6 Seconds to Live, which involved two Marine soldiers that stood their ground at a gate and did not allow a bomber to actually cause 150 deaths, 100 Arabic policemen, and 50 Marine soldiers. Their sacrifice was what resulted in saving the lives of 150 men. And one of the things that I wanted to mention, and for some reason it escaped my mind at the time, and so I thought I'd bring it up now. In the interview that Lieutenant General Kelly had when he was still in the Marine Corps, was with one of the Arabic policemen who witnessed the entire thing. He had mentioned that no sane, normal person would just stand there and embrace their death the way that these two Marine soldiers did. And he said in return, Lieutenant General Kelly said, these are not normal men. In fact, nobody in the military, I'm paraphrasing obviously, but he said nobody in our United States military are normal men. When it would make sense to step aside or run away, retreat, and save your life, when nobody would think down upon you for doing so, these men and women who protect our freedom, and by our I mean those of us who reside in the United States, which I would say probably 95% of my viewers do, those who protect our freedom, both men and women, are not normal. And it really brings a certain amount of awe and wonder to the way that these honorable soldiers that protect our freedom are disciplined. And it got me to think, and I don't know why it escaped my mind, but it got me to think, how can I take such a principle of discipline and apply it to my faith? You know, and I understand that not everyone who participates in these live chats, and not everyone who watches my videos for that matter, are Christian, but I don't necessarily always make it extremely obvious by proclaiming it vocally, but I think it's at least fairly obvious to most of you who watch my channel that I am of the faith. Uh, Apostle Paul in the book of Philippians, in fact, even in the first chapter, uh, he was addressing the church of Philippi in the first century. And one of the things that he mentioned was to stand your ground in your faith. And he used such language in regard to these recipients of this letter uh, in such a way, because he knew that the city of Philippi was that of retired military of the Roman Empire. And so when they were being persecuted, he answered, and we don't have manuscripts of the letter that Paul received while he was imprisoned at the time. In fact, a little bit of background on that. When he was imprisoned, he was actually chained on either side with one arm chained to one soldier and another arm chained to another soldier. And these soldiers were responsible for defending the emperor at the time, or Caesar himself. So, needless to say, I can only imagine that he was in a very uncomfortable position. But it gave him quite an advantage when it came to evangelizing the soldiers, and it eventually played a key role in the Christian movement back then. But he was telling the people of Philippi in a way that they could understand to hold their position in their faith. And so it makes me wonder, when thinking about these two Marine soldiers who stood their ground, and knowing, I would at least imagine that they knew, perhaps not within 6 seconds, but perhaps they knew that this was going to cost them their lives. And they knew that this is what they signed up for, was the possibility that they would not live to see a full term of their military employment. How brave and how courageous that was, knowing that they stared death in the face and they embraced it, they stood their ground, and they accepted the terms. I don't think 6 seconds is enough time to really think about it, especially considering the fact that they each had family. But nevertheless, it is an incredible thing to really think about. And I look forward to sharing at some point more stories like this in the future in our Freedom Friday events. Going to live chat, I want to say hello to Anticonformist. He says, hey, Garrett, and also to Jesse Stafford. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, unless it's just Jess. I'm not sure. But Jesse says, good evening. How are you doing tonight? And I am doing well. Anticonformist let me know that my picture quit moving, and it did, actually, which is unfortunate. I will go ahead and fix that here. But to answer your question, Jesse, I'm doing quite well. I was hoping to have a guest with me. Unfortunately, it sounds like he is still on the job, which is, he's a blue-collar worker just like myself, and he and I are both proud of what we do. And sometimes he's unable to make events such as this, but that's okay, because there's always next week, unless he surprises me. And so far, I just haven't heard from him. But aside from that, I'm doing well. My neck and shoulders, if you knew about it, are, I would say, about 70% better than they were last week. And actually, last week as of today. So let me go ahead and see if I can fix my webcam here. Because that's important. Well, maybe it's important. I know that a lot of you like to be able to see me talking rather than staring at a picture, because I could easily just put up my Houseless on Wheels logo, but you can only look at that for so long, right? So I think I fixed it. And also, Janet, I want to say hello to you as well. And thank you all for joining my chat. Again, I apologize for not putting up an event notice ahead of time. For some reason, I just didn't get around to doing it. Anti-conformist let me know that my webcam is in fact working again, so thank you. I appreciate you letting me know, and if that happens again, please let me know. I'm kind of I'm actually working with I've got my laptop plugged in today. What I did was, since I didn't have for my vehicle, I'm actually in my vehicle right now. I'm parked in a Taco Time parking lot. For those of you who are not from the Pacific Northwest, Taco Time is, I think it's only available in Washington and Oregon, Washington State, I mean, and Oregon, and it was founded here in Washington State. It's basically a local fast food, Americanized Mexican fast food restaurant chain. The one thing I do like about Taco Time is that they use all fresh ingredients, and some of their food menu can actually go along with my choice of dietary restrictions. I do my best to eat a completely vegan diet. I don't identify as a vegan, but simply because I think identity is sacred. And but I do make it a point that I do my best to eat a vegan diet, because it's made a vast difference in the way that I feel with my health. I haven't been sick since I've been on the vegan diet, where so many people around me have been sick. So I highly recommend it, but I won't ever fully endorse it. Yeah, Anti-Conformist says, kind of like Taco Bell, but with fresh ingredients. Yeah, and higher quality ingredients, too. In fact, they use actual food. Sometimes I question whether Taco Bell beef is actually dog food. Nothing against Taco Bell. I used to eat there all the time. I love the place, but I can't eat that stuff anymore. It's that kind of stuff that caused me to be 36 pounds heavier than I needed to be, apparently. Although I will be honest with you, all of you, I don't like weighing under 200 pounds, so I really need to get back into the gym. There was a time when I was much heavier than I am now, but I was still only like 4% body fat. And so being at the weight that I am now is somewhat unnerving for me. So anyway, again, thanks for joining me. I'm hoping that more people will join. Perhaps more will. I haven't really looked at the numbers, but it looks like so far 9 people are currently viewing, which is actually quite impressive, and it's humbling, especially considering the fact that I did not give proper notice like I usually try to give, at least a couple of days notice about the live stream event. So again, my apologies. I know I don't need to apologize that much, but at any rate, so what I wanted to talk about, aside from kind of going back a little bit on what I wanted to talk about last week, is the cost of freedom. Like I mentioned last week, when we kind of covered the definition of freedom, at least in regard to Webster's dictionary, one of the unnerving, at least I find it somewhat annoying and unnerving, definitions for freedom is a political right. And the reason I find that disturbing and somewhat uncomfortable, for that matter, is the fact that that assumes that government is what allows us to have freedom, rather than the government recognizing that it is a God-given gift to society and humanity as a whole. And I'm curious to know what each one of you consider freedom to be as a definition. So feel free to put in your thoughts on that if you want, and I will go ahead and interact with you on that regard. This is my in the most basic of forms, and of course it can go into much deeper details. But to simplify freedom as a definition, considering the fact that it comes from 2 words, I would consider it as a condition, a state of being free from domination or from dominion. And that's and probably because I'd probably consider it that because of the fact that it comes from free and domination or dominion or whatever you want to call it. So, yeah. I'm curious to know your thoughts on that. Janet Burgess, I hope I said that right, says, I did understand you are a Christian. That is why I like to follow your site. Freedom is costly. The men and women, their lives, and their families' lives. I'm an Army brat, and I felt it. And I agree with you completely. Yeah, there's a wise man once said, in fact, I heard it not too long on the radio because I listen to talk radio all the time because I'm just that boring of a guy. You know, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with talk radio. I just know my own personality. A radio host actually mentioned it, and I already knew this, but it was nice. It was refreshing to hear it. He said that freedom is never free and never has been. And I don't know, I mean, considering the fact, at least from my understanding of the history of the human race, since we've only been around for give or take 6,000 or 7,000 years, I don't know, since we don't have documentation going that far back, I don't know if I can really say that freedom has never been free. But I can say that it is never free now. Since freedom is a God-given gift, I would imagine before the fall that there was a point when freedom was in fact free, but because mankind is the way that it is, and with, you know, as the old parable goes, or the old, escaping the words here, proverb goes, the love of money is the root of all evil. In other words, and I could probably translate it from the original Hebrew in far deeper terms, basically because of greed and pride, humanity has caused freedom to be very costly. Janine says, hi, Garrett. How long has this been going? And hi, Janine. Glad to have you here. It's been going on for about just under 20 minutes. I was a little late. Rachamel, I hope I said that right, or Rachamel, I can never remember. I know you corrected me on it once. I hope I said it right. I want to say hello to you as well. Thank you for tuning in. But as I was saying, and as Janet so brilliantly pointed out, freedom is very costly. Naturally, even in the early days before the Declaration of Independence was even signed, freedom costed a great amount, hundreds if not thousands of lives. And unfortunately, it continues to be a very costly thing. And, yeah. And My Johnson, I want to say hello to you. I just noticed that you typed something. My Johnson says, nice sound setup for a van. In fact, it's a fairly new setup, believe it or not. The microphone's not new. I've had that for a number of years from back when I used to host karaoke parties and DJ for professionally, at least semi-professionally. I wouldn't necessarily call myself a professional DJ by any standard of the definition. But the microphone's old, but I've got a new, as of last week, I've got a new desk microphone arm, and I also received a USB mixer. It's literally powered only by USB. I don't have to plug it into an AC outlet in order for it to run. I don't know if I can, but I'll try to go ahead and show you. There we go. Yeah, it looks like it's showing up. It's to give you a reference on how tiny this is. I mean, this is my hand, so I mean it's really small. I mean, I do have large hands, but nevertheless, I mean it's tiny. and it's just large enough, or it's just functional enough to be able to do podcasts, do live stream events like YouTube here, and you know, maybe one day I'll actually get into the whole podcast thing, but I don't plan on doing that anytime soon. I certainly don't have the followers to be able to do that here, and I know I'd have to do a lot more marketing to do it on a different website. But, you got to start somewhere and build your way up, and thankfully all of you have been gracious enough to be dedicated followers to my channel, and I greatly appreciate that. So, as I mentioned before, for those who are just joining us, there was, I reflected on last week's discussion a little bit, and I went ahead and discussed a little bit more into what I wanted to talk about last week that escaped my mind about how brave and courageous it was for those two Marines to stand their ground, and with such discipline as a concept. How can I apply that to my faith? Because we all, we as human beings are not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And therefore, regardless of how much effort we put into being perfect, because, as Christ said, be perfect for your Father is perfect. It's always the goal. But on this side of glory, it's definitely an impossible task. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there can't be progress in the meantime. And knowing my own sin, I can assure you that such a worthy thought as how can I apply such principles to my faith? It's a very moving thing to meditate on, let me tell you. And some days I do better at it than others. Going back to the live chat, Janine asked, what is the topic? The topic is the cost of freedom, and I encourage, but obviously don't force, everyone to give their 2 cents worth on it. Well, I'm sure your thoughts are far more worth than 2 cents, certainly worth more than mine. But I am definitely curious on what people consider as the definition of freedom and what that freedom costs. Anticonformist says Garrett has to go high tech with his live streams. I do, and it's more because I did this not even just necessarily for the live streams, but I also did it to be able to do some recording of music because I've had an itch to do recording again. I'm very impressed with how clean the sound is on this mixer. Another benefit is it is also battery powered, so it has like a 4 or 6 hour battery time that I can use as well. Rishamel says so many people take freedom as a given without cost, and you're very correct. I will put this another way, and I think this might go alongside with what you meant, but I kind of want to add to it, if nothing else, and that is that with the Webster's Dictionary definition of freedom as a political right, and seeing how, because I kind of follow politics quite a lot, actually, one of my favorite topics to talk about with people that are open-minded enough. And of course, this is not a political discussion, but I can understand how people might, or how people or YouTube might consider it, recognize certain political aspects of it simply because there are consequences with any sort of topic that can become political. And that's because everything now it has become political. At least that's what the media is causing, or our culture in general is doing, is politicizing everything. But this is not a political discussion. But I will say that it seems as though the more socialist that certain people in our greatest nation on God's green earth want things to go, the more they just want to take advantage of things and expect it to be a free thing, which involves the government, or which forces the government to get involved, or maybe the government forces themselves upon our freedom. And that in itself, although I'm sure, I have no doubt that there are good intentions involved, I hope, it ends up becoming more of a mess. And anyone who understands constitutional conservatism, conservatism, yeah, I said it right the first time, knows that government serves two purposes: to preserve and protect our God-given freedom. And let's see. Going back to live chat, I hope that made sense. I was hoping it would. Anticonformism says, I wonder if a live stream can be in stereo. From at least the way my headphones are coming out, and I do so from the monitor itself. So it's supposed to be the way that, excuse me, that you guys are hearing it. I hear it out of both the left and right, so it is stereo, at least for me. But if you're watching this over a cell phone or some sort of mobile device, it may not come out that way, simply because most mobile devices, unless they're larger tablets, only have one speaker. Although I really can't say that with this. I think this does have one speaker. My cell phone does, but it's kind of a cheaper cell phone. Gypsy Angel Soul says, your voice is so calming, I would listen to your podcast. I appreciate that. So for some reason I have a hard time with compliments, probably because I try to humble myself, and it takes a lot of effort sometimes. And I could go into details on that. I won't. Gypsy Angel Soul also says, I always believe that living out faith is so important. Holy huddles, yeah, are overrated. They're overrated. I'm curious to know, Gypsy, what you mean by holy huddles. I think I know, but instead of making assumptions, if you could elaborate a little bit, I would greatly appreciate it. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. And apparently Janine is getting done with work. She says, I'm going to clock out and then participate. I think that's fantastic. Let's see. And then Mai Johnson says, do you know Ghost Wolf Art? I do know Ghost Wolf Art. And yeah, there we go. Rich Mel says, sound is awesome. Also, you are saying my name correctly, Ray. Okay, perfect. I always do my best to try to pronounce people's names correctly, because I think it's a respectful thing to do. I know that when people pronounce my last name incorrectly, it doesn't really bother me, because even though it's like the Smith of Norway, it's uncommon here. Lorraine says, hello, Garrett. Do you think the word freedom can be defined differently for so many situations? And that's a great question. In fact, that's one that could probably be debated. And I would, in a certain sense, say no, but in another way say yes, only because the fact it depends on how you view something as being defined. Now, let me elaborate on that a little bit here, as well as I can. Freedom is a principle. It is a gift, don't get me wrong, but it is a principle in a certain respect, because it's almost like a position, having a position on something. For example, being a constitutional, well, I shouldn't call myself a constitutional conservative, but since I lean toward constitutional conservatism, and that's what I believe in for our country, when talking about certain things such as it's a really touchy topic, but abortion, for example, I wouldn't like. I completely disagree with it, but to those who actually do agree with it, I'm not going to have any. I'm not going to frown upon them just because they have a different worldview from me. But it's something that, as one who believes in constitutional conservatism, I would say that it is not something that the government should be funding, which it currently does. But it being a social service is not necessarily something that I say is unconstitutional, so long as the government is not involved. So, if we were to apply that, in other words, if Planned Parenthood wanted to exist, and it does, government funds like I think 20% of its income, and they call themselves a nonprofit. Clearly, they're not, but we won't go into that. If Planned Parenthood wanted to exist as it currently does, as a social service, I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I do have a problem with its ethics, but that's a whole other story. But the fact that it exists, I don't have a problem with, and wanting to offer a certain service, so long as the government is not involved in it, because that's not what the government's for. The government's not to pay for someone's abortion or their whatever other services they offer, and I know they claim to offer a number of them. Nevertheless, so applying this to freedom, it's not a matter of redefining it depending on the situation. It's knowing how to apply it in certain situations, and I think that can be debated. Simply because we all have different ways to think about certain things. For example, charter schools. I'm all for it, like homeschooling and all that. Rather, there are certain people, and I'm not going to necessarily say that they reside on one side or the other on political grounds, but there are a number of people that believe that the government are the ones who get to decide what kind of schooling all of our children get and adults get from their, as far as their education is concerned, and and then there's also the camp of people, or at least a certain number of people, who believe that homeschooling is the best way to go, and that there are charter schools also available. So in that way, we can either define freedom as a choice of how we can actually have our children be educated, or perhaps freedom is not having to worry about your children's education because the government's already taken care of it for you. That's the debate, is, okay, how do we apply freedom in this respect? It's not necessarily defining freedom, because obviously everyone should have an opportunity, not necessarily the right, but the opportunity to education. It's a matter of how do we apply that freedom. So I hope that makes sense. Perhaps it doesn't, but I'm hoping it does. And Janet asks, do they say God-given freedom now? I will say this, character development is one of the things that is being highly pushed in public education now. And perhaps we can go into more detail on what that is later on. But I will say that it does involve refuting the idea of God in it. And that's paraphrasing, but it's still there. And I don't want to go more into it than that, but I think that at least somewhat answers that question. It's not everywhere. It's not every public school system and whatnot, but it is definitely a lot in the mainstream, more liberal-leaning school systems, much of which, being in a blue state myself, is highly involved. Gypsy says, I think this is where she is explaining in further detail about holy huddles, when people just live out their faith in their own community only and not out with others. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. I was almost under the impression of talking about almost like the whole church persona, where you all act holier than thou and acting at your best, dressing up as your best and whatnot. But then once you leave the church doors, you go out and do your own business. But that makes a lot more sense. And now I need to go back to, and this is referring to when she said, or he said, sorry, I'm assuming she said, I have always believed that living out faith is so important. Holy huddles are overrated, and I completely agree with you on that. Definitely disagree with, or definitely agree with you and disagree with holy huddles, especially considering the fact I know it's more comfortable with the knowing. Well, first of all, it's easy to love someone who loves you, right? It's far more challenging to love someone who hates you. And in that respect, it's much more comfortable to live in a community, in an environment that completely agrees with one's faith. But I think it's far more fruitful and far more profitable, philosophically and just from the standpoint of conversation, to reside and simply converse with those who completely, on the other scale of things, disagree with you. So yes, holy huddles are definitely overrated. I totally agree with you there. And much like the Greater Bilby, I also had not heard of that term before. By the way, I want to also say hello to the Greater Bilby. Nice to have you joining in here. And my Johnson, I don't necessarily want to read the question over the live chat simply because of the fact that it's not necessarily relevant to the conversation, but I will just say that I know he means well, and I hope that it is satisfactory enough to until maybe we can have a private conversation about that whole thing, because I know he means well. Janet says that my last name would be Burgess, not Burgess. I'm not sure that works. Maybe there was a. Yeah, I must be lost. Something must have actually gone over my mind. Janine asks, how do you feel about equality and freedom, considering the Constitution declares all men and women equal? For instance, I believe felons should be able to vote. I do agree that felons, well, I shouldn't say felons, but people with felonies on their record should have the ability to vote. Although at the same time, I think there are certain things that can be taken away, much like being incarcerated. Naturally, you lose your rights. They're God-given rights, but you lose them because it's the same thing like the Old Testament had its. Just totally lost my. There we go. I almost lost it, but I found it again. Don't worry, I found it. The Old Testament had its. I totally lost it again. Covenant. There we go. I got it. The Old Testament had its covenant with God and the Jewish people and those who wanted to convert to Judaism and whatnot, and it was conditional. And then, of course, in both 586 BC and in 70 AD, those conditions were broken many times by the Jewish people, and that's why Jerusalem fell. It was a judgment from God to Jerusalem. In much the same way, I think our American rights, which were, well, they're not American rights, they are human rights that America recognizes, they're conditional. I mean, freedom is conditional if you really think about it. It's God-given, but it has its restrictions, it has its boundaries, and it has its conditions. So I think those things can be earned back, much like whenever Jerusalem repented, God forgave them and restored their status. I think it's the same. I think it goes the same way when it comes to things such as people with felonies being able to vote. So I hope that makes sense. Greater Bilby said, I only found out just the other day that anyone incarcerated can't vote. Yeah, that's very true, unfortunately. Well, it's fortunate to a certain respect, but it does have its unfortunate aspects to it as well. My understanding is that it's not easy to get that right back. Janine says, we feel for underprivileged youth and then disparage them as adults when they make mistakes. If someone had made reparations, should be considered equal. Well, that's a touchy thing. Well, for one thing, one has to consider, what does it mean to be underprivileged, and what does it mean to be privileged? I mean, perhaps a child didn't have the same opportunities as a child, or currently. But the great thing about this capitalist economy that we do is that it opens the floodgates of opportunity, even if one comes from almost nothing. And there are thousands, if not more than that, testimonies to that. We had people who migrated this country with literally nothing, and they built up their own businesses and whatnot. So, it's one of those things that can be debated. It should be recognized, but at the same time, we have to come to agreements, at least come into discussion on what it means to be underprivileged, and what it also means to to a certain degree disparaged. And again, I hope that makes sense. At least that's the way that I view it, and I could be completely wrong because I'm a fallen human being, just like everyone else. Only I'm pretty sure that most people are better than I am. My Johnson asks if asks something about asks if Ghost Wolf Art is a scammer. Well, all I can say is he's got plenty of videos out there on his YouTube, and it's one thing to ask for someone's opinion on someone else, and it's another thing to go directly to the source. And I've heard many things, many rumors about many people, whether they're on YouTube or whether they're in person. And I always just find it to be most credible to go to the source and find out how trustworthy they are. And the evidence will prove itself. Like I said, I think he means well. I also am very firm on my understanding that he does not always come across well. And especially when it comes to some of his slogans that he says. Sometimes the proof is not in the pudding, more or less. But then again, I can be very guilty of that too. So I'm not going to point out a speck in his eye when I've got a log of my own. It's just one of those things. Janet says, you say you like to know the proper way to say our names, and that is how mine is said. Okay. Burgess, right? So it's Burgess? So that's what you were trying to do. You were trying to correct me. Okay. And I appreciate that. I really do. The Greater Bilby says the Bernardo's children were called underprivileged, yet so many of them turned out to be giants of industry and business and politicians, etc. Yeah, and that's very correct. Very true. Thanks for pointing that out. That's one great example. Gypsy says, the idea of getting ahead is a tough one. Being able to live in a van or RV makes it so much easier to get ahead, in quotes, and move forward, but you have to let go of expectations of wanting a house, etc. I agree, and I kind of see things. I don't know if I would disagree, but I would see things slightly differently. Excuse me, by the way. I'm a little hungry, and I'm getting those hungry burps going on. My apologies. But I agree to a certain point, and I'll tell you why. Living in a van or an RV or any other type of vehicle, it definitely relieves one from the financial responsibility of some sort of shelter, some sort of roof over your head that you work hard to pay for, yet you're only home for maybe 10 hours a day, enough time to eat, maybe get a couple of things done, or maybe watch an episode or two of television, and then you go to sleep for 6 to 8 hours, or in my case, 3 to 4, because I don't like to sleep that much. So having a mobile lifestyle, such as or even just off-grid lifestyle, perhaps you own some land and you built some stick and bricks or whatever, and it was small enough to where it didn't necessarily fall in line of needing permits, or like myself, you can have a vehicle that you've set up, which I'm currently in, and again, I'm parked in the parking lot of Taco Time, waiting for someone to get off work so we can go meet. In fact, he just let me know 20 minutes ago, apparently, that he is still on the job site. It's supposed to be a moderate job, and it's turned into a rather big hassle, apparently. So, hope him well. I know he's really good at his job, so I'm sure he's getting it done and he's doing it proper. But yeah, this is a way that I still, I'm almost full time in here, but I still am trying to get everything situated. I think I've mentioned it before, and so I'm still. I mean, my rent's pretty cheap. I mean, at least for this area, I pay like upwards of $600 a month, which is very low considering that even getting a room for rent can cost upwards of $1,200 a month in most areas where I live, and a one-bedroom apartment it's not unforeseen to see them in the $1,600 to $2,200 a month range, and I wish I was kidding. As far as having to let go of expectations of wanting a house, that's where I would kind of see things a little bit differently, because unless there's just no foreseeable way to do so, I would think that living in a vehicle, at least temporarily, may be a great opportunity to save up for a place. There are still very small opportunities, but they still exist to get a house in one of the lesser expensive cities to live in for around $120,000. I mean, it's not very often you see them, but they do exist still. So the opportunity is still there, and I think that living in a vehicle is a great way to save up for that place. In fact, if you make the standard, I think the average family income is something like $60,000 a year in the United States. If you make that much and you live in a vehicle, I mean, you can save up $120,000 or $150,000 in a matter of 4 or 5 years. I mean, and with ease, comfortably. So, but you're definitely right. I would agree with you for the most part. Rachel Mel says, what about, say, psychotic, demented folks in mental hospitals' right to vote? They have the right to vote, but is it okay? I would imagine that most people with such maladies, if you will, probably don't have much concern about voting. I could be absolutely wrong, but based off of my own observation, because I've known a number, I couldn't tell you the exact number, but I've known a number of people that were under such conditions, and they didn't necessarily have any. They didn't have the awareness to know that there was voting going on, let alone the interest. There were much bigger struggles for them to deal with and people around them, unfortunately. Let's see. The Greater Bilby, when you convert your van, do you have a great detail? Do you have to give details of that conversion to your insurance company? You don't actually, and that's a great question. Now, it might be wise to do so only for the aspect of covering in case something happens to it. And if that were to be the case, I mean, naturally, if you were to be doing that, it would be with the intention to convert the van or whatever vehicle to RV insurance, which you can cover a lot more of the internal aspects and the internal properties of the RV. So it's not an absolute requirement because the base of the structure of any vehicle is it is what it is. Most RVs, at least that are not Class A RVs, like the Class C's, the Class B's, are still considered like for example, a Ford E350 Cutaway, and they just add a box on the Cutaway and they convert it into an RV, for example. So, in that respect, everything is simply a vehicle unless you state otherwise, and it's not an absolute requirement unless you want to cover those items that are in your RV or other vehicle as such. Let's see. Janet says, "I believe you live. I believe you live in the USA, but are you free to live in a van or car? This would be great at Freedom. I would love to do it. Not that easy. It's not necessarily easy to live in a vehicle. I mean, I do so almost full time, and it does get a little bit chillier at night now, especially once it gets below 30 degrees, which is I can for the most part go with just a t-shirt on, but waking up in the morning is the biggest challenge because I know I have to get out of my nice warm bed and put some cold pants on. That's always fun. It definitely wakes you up way better than coffee does, though. But in the USA, and my Johnson asks, Dane, where are you? I'm in Washington State, Seattle area. It is illegal to sleep in your vehicle, although it is not really enforced all that much. In fact, I don't know if I haven't even heard of people getting in trouble for it because there's far greater things to be concerned about. I think the main reason, and I could be wrong, but I think the main reason why they made it illegal to sleep in your vehicle is because of drinking and driving and whatnot. So, but again, I could be wrong. It could be a population control thing. Who knows? But in the city of Seattle, where they're trying to promote the idea of government funding heroin dens, unfortunately, they call them safe shooting sites. But let's be honest, what's safe about shooting heroin? Not what I really want to talk about, but with that, they're making it legal to sleep in your RV and making it a thing that could cause a cop to lose their badge for if they try to move a vehicle which a homeless person sleeps in. And there's I don't even want to go into it. Let's just say I'm shaking my head over it. Janine says, we do live in a fantastic country where there are many opportunities. I do believe that so many get stigmatized, and that's why we need to remember we the people and work together, not against. And I agree. I mean, that was the original intention of the original intent of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and everything. Didn't come out perfect, still isn't perfect as far as overall results. But then again, there is no such thing as a perfect country, but we're probably the closest to it. Not to say anything about other countries, but I can only speak for my own. And let's see here. The Greater Bilby says, we don't have enough housing of any sort, and rents are sky high due to lack of availability. That's the same thing that's happening in most condensed city areas, unfortunately. That's why it is not uncommon, like, for example, in San Francisco, which passed a ridiculous budget. Again, won't go into details on that. Uh, their rents are upwards of $4,600 a month for a one-bedroom apartment, or maybe that was for a studio, one of the two. It's ridiculous. I mean, I could be wrong of the exact numbers, but either way, it's an atrocious amount. But there's a lot of money to be made in San Francisco, apparently, because people pay it. Let's see. Janine says, I am choosing the van life so that I can afford a place to gain freedom from the monetary struggle and being a slave of possessions. Yeah, I totally get that because, I've mentioned this in a few of my videos when it comes to uh, my storage minimizing efforts that I made, which my brother uses my storage unit now, but pretty much everything that I own is out of it at this point. In fact, one of the things that remained in my storage unit was my bed, which I now have in my vehicle. So I'm almost everything's out of there. The only reason why I haven't taken everything out at this point is because I can't get to it anymore because of my brother's stuff. But that's okay. He needed it, and I have it. So, but I used to be borderline hoarder. Not well. Perhaps I wasn't a borderline hoarder, but I definitely had the potential of becoming a hoarder. So now being able to fit everything in my vehicle is it sure has lifted a lot of weight off of my shoulders. Let's see. And apparently Gypsy lives in a travel trailer, and I think that's fantastic. I would recommend a minimalistic lifestyle to everybody. Unfortunately, not everybody sees it that way, and that's fine. It is what it is. Apparently, My Johnson says, apparently there are some places where you will actually get arrested for sleeping in your vehicle. I'm not surprised. Unfortunately, I am not surprised. It is something that could technically happen here in the Seattle area where you can get arrested for sleeping in your vehicle. But again, most cops have something else that they want to get done. So they just ask you to move your vehicle, assuming that you're not under the influence, which, since I don't drink, that's not an issue. But, it's one of those things. I assume, actually, I think there's a better reason for making sleeping in your vehicle illegal other than being under the influence, and that is taxes, paying property taxes and whatnot. Which is, I looked at it this way. Look, I work full-time or more. They're getting plenty of taxes from me as it is. Let's see. Janet says, well, God bless and keep safe. Remember the troops who are there keeping us free and their family. Absolutely. If you're taking off, I want to say thank you for joining us, Janet. And I agree with you 110%, even though that's an impossible number. So thanks again for joining us. The Greater Billy says, yes, we observe a minute's silence here a couple of hours or so ago for Remembrance Day here. I think that's awesome. The 11th hour of the 11th day and the 11th month. That's a great thing. We should be doing that more often here in the United States. That's all I'm saying. Apparently, thanks to My Johnson's information here, and whether it's accurate or not, I'm going to give My Johnson the benefit of the doubt, but apparently you can get arrested in Key West and San Francisco. They normally just knock on your door and tell you to leave. That's good to know, but apparently it's potentially something that could happen. Follow Summer. Hi, I want to thank you first of all for joining in, and I appreciate you and your participation. Follow Summer says, I worry sometimes that they will crack down on van dwelling as more and more of us want to start this lifestyle. I think the one thing that would want to caused them to want to really start cracking down on this is the mess that certain van dwellers and RV dwellers and whatnot leave behind. I see this happen on occasion, and it's just a real shame. And it's one thing that's caused most Walmarts here in the Seattle area to be against their regulations to be able to sleep overnight because of the mess that's been left behind before. And it's a real shame because most of us just want to, we just want to, get through the night, have our sleep, and then leave. We don't want to leave any mess behind or anything like that. So, Sam Finn, I want to welcome you to the live chat, and thank you for joining in and participating. Sam Finn asks, have you ever considered a houseboat? Yes and no. The reason why I say it that way is because I think it would be fantastic to live on the water. I love the motion rocking back and forth. It's very soothing to me. A lot of people think it's nauseating, but I enjoy it. I say no because there's no way I could afford a houseboat here in Seattle. They do have a fairly quick turnover at certain times of the year. But, you're looking at $400,000 plus. And houseboats are not that big, as I'm sure you're very well aware. Let's see. And if I don't get to your comment, please forgive me. I'm doing the best I can. And I love this interaction. I mean, this is probably the best, most active live feed or live chat I've had in a live feed in quite a while. So thanks a lot, everybody, for participating. And if I don't get to your comment, that doesn't mean I didn't read it. Let's see. Anticonformist says they're already cracking down on tiny houses. Vehicle living is next, and you're probably right. The reason, as far as cracking down on tiny houses, I mean, mostly what they do there is they've slapped on certain regulations and require you to have certain permits. The only way to be able to get away from permits is to have wheels as your foundation rather than a concrete slab, and who knows how long it'll be before even that's no longer going to be the case. Follow Summer says, in Canada, we don't have BLM land, just Crown land, which is sometimes hard to get to or even find. I wouldn't be surprised. We don't have BLM land here either in the state of Washington. We have Discover Pass, where we can actually go to national parks and whatever else, but we don't have BLM land. We either have open land, which is not very much, mostly just mountains, or it's all Discover, which I have a Discover Pass, but nevertheless. My John says they don't want people living in junky RVs and $1 million neighborhoods. You know what? If I was $1 million neighbor, I wouldn't either. I'm just, I wouldn't mind so much if it was a nicer RV, but definitely not a rundown one. So much like, you saw the condition of my van before I painted it. It was a total eyesore. I would totally understand if someone said, "Hey, dude, you need to move that thing," or call the cops, and the cop has to come over and say, "Dude, come on, man." I totally get it, but it looks better now. The Greater Bilby says, I have looked into houseboating, but our weather here is too unstable with cyclones. I'd have to relocate south to do it, and I don't like the colder weather there. And, I like colder weather, but I can understand. Ford Van Man, I want to say hello to you. Thank you for joining in. I appreciate it, as I know you know. And by the way, I'm just curious on when that participation video is going to come out. I don't know that particular date. Hope you don't mind me even mentioning it. Sam Finn says you can make your own houseboat from a pontoon boat. I hope pontoon. Is that how you pronounce it? You're probably right. I really don't know the whole process on that whole thing. The Greater Bilby says, I talk too much, or type too much. You know what you do. Shame on you. Just shame on you. I totally agree. But then again, who am I to talk? Here I am opening up my noise box, and I've been doing that for the last hour and 4 minutes, something like that. Let's see. Follow Summer says, "I love live chats." You know what? I love being able to host live chats because it allows me the opportunity to communicate and interact with all of you when I don't have the time to answer comments as often as I would truly like to. Let's see. And apparently the video that Ford Van Man was working on was available a few hours ago, which means that, I checked earlier this morning, and by earlier I mean like 6 o'clock this morning, Pacific Standard Time, but apparently it's up now, so I'm going to look forward to watching that later. You should definitely check out Ford Van Man's channel. A little shout out there because he's got some great stuff on there, and little endorsement for you there, buddy. Let's see. I think I must have missed something. Oh, I did. Janine said, Seattle is trying to pass a law which allows for parking areas for van dwellers. I don't know if it passed. It hasn't that I'm aware of. In fact, there is such a thing. I mean, California is already doing it, but there's also talk about force the local state government forcing homeowners to be able to forcing homeowners with property to allow homeless people to encamp on their property, and they would get a quote-unquote little distribution off of their taxes, which means that basically for every $1,000 that they have to spend cleaning up after whatever damages happen on their property, they might get a few cents back from their tax return, which is just ridiculous. The Greater Bilby says the time goes so fast live chatting. You are correct. I didn't know. I mean, when I first started doing live chats, I didn't even know that I could talk for over an hour straight. And my dry mouth, because I left my water bottle up in the cabin of my vehicle, is my mouth's let me know that I've been talking a lot more than I normally do, which is perfectly fine because it's a great sacrifice to be able to talk to all of you. My John says some van RV people have switched to minivans for stealth, but you can't really live in a minivan long term. I think that depends on the person, really, to be honest with you. I know that there's one guy, I can't remember the name of his channel, but granted, I think he's also like 5'2" or something like that. He's quite a bit shorter than someone like myself. He lives in his minivan full time, and he's been doing it for, I think, almost a year now. Perhaps that's still short term, but nevertheless, that's pretty impressive. I know that I don't think I could get away with a minivan being over 6 feet tall. So, but it is what it is. I think if push came to shove, I could probably pull it off. I don't know if I'd want to, though. Let's see. The Greater Bilby says, I can't. I'd find it hard to live in a van that I couldn't stand up in, and I agree. Probably because I have chronic pain in my back, and most of the time I don't notice it because I'm so used to it. But that would be difficult for me too. But I guess that just gives you opportunity to get out of the van and walk around. Even if it rains, you can always just go somewhere, I suppose. Oh, one other thing I wanted to touch on with my Johnson's last comment about the stealth factor. As time goes on, I've noticed that I really don't care that much about stealth because, for one thing, the police know what you're doing. They really do. Even if you're in a minivan, they know what you're doing. And secondly, it's just not really much of a high priority anymore. So, it's just one of those things that seems to have changed as far as interest and concern. It's just an adjustment, I suppose you could say. Follow Summer says, I am only 4'10", so I am meant for van life. Haha, you're correct. You're also, I think technically in the United States, you're you'd be considered as what the politically correct would say, a little person. You're on that borderline right there, but not that really matters. 4'10" though, that's definitely the perfect size for even minivan life. That's all right. I'll still love you regardless. Janine says, I have been thinking of the cost of personal freedom. It requires discipline, ethics, morals, and a strong personal constitution. Yes, you are very correct. And much of that goes back to, in fact, all of it goes back to my comment earlier that freedom has its boundaries, its restrictions, and its cost. And it's conditional. It really is. Much like the example earlier with Jerusalem. Let's see. RV Lucky says, stop by to say hi. Great hangout. Thank you, RV Lucky. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you saying hi and hello. I hope your health is in good order. By the way, RV Lucky has his own channels you can check out. He has some great stories, and he's also converted several vehicles over the years. And guys like 86 or 86 years old, and you wouldn't know it. I mean, it just blows my mind. I hope that I can. I hope to be able to live up to 86, let alone, whatever age I end up being, I suppose. But yeah, check out his channel. He's got a great channel. My John says that Will Prowse guy switched to a minivan and did it for 2 months and gave up and rented an apartment. Well, it's not for everybody. Some people can do it, some people can't. But yeah, I still stand by what I said. I think it depends on the person, whether they can actually do it or not. I mean, some people literally just need a place to sleep at night, and that's all they need. And for that kind of person, anything more than a minivan is probably too much. Anti-conformism says, Garrett, are you talking about Anthony from My Life on Wheels? Yes, that is exactly who I'm talking about. About living in a minivan. The guy has some great things that he's got some great content too, by the way. My Life on Wheels, you should check him out. I'm gonna have to let him know too that I gave him a shout out, so that way he knows that that it's not such a big surprise that so many people just go on and check out his channel. But he's got a great channel. Really nice guy. Very considerate of his surroundings. He's actually talked about having to clean up after some people that decided to leave trash behind and whatnot. Or maybe he just reported it. I'm not sure exactly, but he's actually got a really cool setup too. Very basic, but really nice setup. It looks very relaxing in his van. Follow Summer says, I'm a woman, but not a little person. Hey, I was joking. I'm sure you know I was joking, but still. Yeah. Honestly, I just view people as people, made in the image and likeness of God. I don't see any difference other than that. We all have our own characteristics. And apparently, fellow Summer just subbed RV Lucky. I'm glad that you did. You're not going to regret it. Sam Finn, great question. Sam Finn asks, "Is there a dog in your future?" I don't know. If I were to get a dog, I'd probably want one that doesn't shed, which there are very few available that don't. I mean, there are some that actually have hair and not fur, and that would probably be the ideal option if I were to go that route. But as for right now, not so much. But you never know. I mean, perhaps at some point, if I were lonely enough, which I really don't ever get lonely, that might be an option. Ford Van Man says stealth is not important in my area. I have boondocked in police station parking lot before. There's the irony right there. I love it. Oh, that's fantastic. And Janice says, I've dreamt of living in a van all my life. You know, like I can remember as far back as 9, I've had at least some sort of nomadic lifestyle in mind. And she's finally doing it, so good for you, Janine. Let's see. Apparently, Ford Van Man did it for the sole purpose of wanting to see if he could get away with sleeping in a police station parking lot. Uh, it, was it solely? Was it a solely dedicated police station parking lot, or was it like a city hall, like what we have around here? We have a city hall, and it's also a courthouse and a police station. And we even have one city hall that's a fire station and a police station and a courthouse, a jail. I mean, it's like an all-in-one type of thing. And it's true that Janine also has a YouTube channel, so you can check her out. I haven't really watched any of her videos yet, but I think I've seen a couple of them, but they were mostly floral videos. But I think she mentioned at one point that she also has some minimization videos, trying to get rid of clutter and stuff like that. So if you're looking for some inspiration, there you go. I didn't know it. Apparently, the Greater Bilby says Anthony from My Life on Wheels. He is 51, or at least the Greater Bilby thinks that's what he said. And if that's correct, I would have to agree. He looks really young. He does have a little bit of gray hair, but he does look young. There's no question about that. So I think I'm caught up on all my live chat comments. In fact, I should probably see where my friend is, because I have been wanting to catch up with him on that. So hang on for just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and see where he's at and go from there. So I will be right back. All right, sorry about that. And I think there was a question here that I almost overlooked. Follow Summer asks, does Seattle have a street where a lot of van dwellers seem to park on? I know Vancouver has an area where a lot of van dwellers go. There's since I don't live in the actual main city of Seattle, I couldn't answer that in full detail, but I do know that there are some overpasses where a lot of RVs end up parking. It was actually meant at one point to be parking for a train, which they still haven't laid any tracks on yet, and yet it's $500 million over budget. Not even one track is being laid yet. Yeah. So right now it's just used for homeless people and whatnot, and some and RV dwellers, some cars as well, but mostly RVs, and it's a mess down there, unfortunately. It was also going to be secondarily used as parking for the stadiums because we have 3 stadiums in Seattle. So, yeah. Unfortunately, I mean, and I know there are definitely some other streets in Seattle that have vans and RVs, and it's obvious that they're there for almost permanent status. I couldn't tell you exact street names and whatnot, but yeah, it's an unfortunate situation. Oh, apparently my inverter has kicked off. Correction. I unplugged my laptop adapter from my inverter. Uh, Basically, since I didn't have a large inverter, I went ahead and purchased a. Since I'm going to need it eventually anyway, I've got a DeWalt power station which has a 1,000-watt true sine wave inverter built into it and a 40 amp hour battery, which I will obviously use for charging power tool batteries and whatnot. But it's got some other things like a couple of USB ports, a nice bright flashlight. It's pretty nice. I mean, it's costly. It's like $250, but it's going to serve multiple purposes, and one of them, obviously, is being able to plug in my laptop. Let's see here. My Johnson asks, "Have you got solar yet?" And no, I have not actually. I am just running. I'm just charging I just charge my battery while I drive, and that's basically it. Nothing other than that. In fact, I mostly just use my DeWalt power station at this point, and let's see how well you can see this. What's powering my lights right now? Oh, my webcam went off apparently. Let me fix that real quick so I can show you. I have a 20 amp USB charger, and it can charge by solar, but it takes like 2 days for that to actually happen. I'll show you real quick. You can get it off of Amazon, and it's like $40 or something like that. It's fairly reasonably priced, but it'll charge a cell phone like 17 times or some crazy number like that. Well, maybe not 17, maybe like 12 times. But it's worked out really well so far. And I'll plug in like a USB fan and also like my my light. I've got a USB LED light strip, which you can also get off of Amazon. I think it was like $22 for the whole thing, and I only used half the lights, so I don't need that many lights. But it's got color control on it. It's got a remote and stuff like that. But yeah, this is it right here. It's like 20 amp hours, I think. Doesn't give me the exact number, does it? No, it's 24 amp hours. So 24 amps. It'll charge my cell phone 11 times, I think. It's a lot, which I'm very happy about, because if I can avoid using my main battery for charging a cell phone and whatnot, because it does lower your voltage regulation, and it makes some other applications not work quite as well. So any chance I can get to do that, because I got cheap batteries. I mean, they're they're not cheap as in bad quality, but they're cheap as in, you know, I paid $100 for them. So, and they're high amp hours, so they last a long time. But you know, it is what it is. Let's see. And by the way, thank you, conformism, for letting me know my webcam froze. Let's see. My Johnson says, dude, you need solar if you are going to live in your van. You know, it's interesting. I'm not going to disagree. At some point, I would like to get solar, so I'm not going to disagree with you. But since I drive pretty much every day, it hasn't been an issue. When I'm sitting in one spot for 3 days, yeah, unless I turn on my engine, yeah, I totally agree with you. But for the most part, I really don't use that much electricity. I just go with the bare minimum, and it's comfortable for me. Like, I use a little alcohol burning fireplace for heat. Not really, and I just charge this. I've got my laptop. That's really the only thing I plug into the inverter, and I've got a cell phone and a couple of other appliances that run off of USB, and that's basically all I use. So, does anyone know of any Car Dweller channels? That's what Follow Summer asks. And yes, I actually do know of a great Car Dweller channel, and I wish I remembered the name of it. I might have to get back to you on that. I'm going to try to find it real quick because this lady is amazing. And another nice thing is that she's very open and honest and genuine, very caring. She's a Christian, which is a bonus. I just like her channel. She's got a lot of great content, and I hope I can find it. I'm going to have to look at my history because I don't think I ever subbed to her channel. Let's see. This is going to take a minute, especially since I'm running off of my cell phone Wi-Fi, but I think I can find it because that is an important thing. Well, I think it's important. I should be getting closer. Ah, yes. Katie Carney. I'll copy it into the description. Whoops. That's not what I wanted to do.
Hi, this is Katie. Yes, I just got out of the shower.
That's not what I wanted to do either.
That's why this is...
Sorry, Katie. Didn't mean to do that to you. It was under 10 seconds, so I think it's still okay. Let me type it in live chat, so that way you guys have it. That's her name, so there you go. Really cool, really cool channel. So check her out if you haven't already. I would imagine that most people who have watched my videos have probably heard of her, but I could be wrong. Let's see. And once you actually watch some of her videos, I think other car dwellers will show up because there are a ton of them. There really are. There are more than you think. Apparently I missed a question on that Janine asked. I must have missed it because I didn't see it. Do you feel more freedom now that you are living in your van? That's a good question. And as far as not financially yet, because naturally I still pay rent, but that's probably going to change next month. Again, I'm sleeping in my vehicle and just living in my vehicle like 5 days a week at this point for the most part. Something like that, 4 or 5 days a week. I can't remember. I don't even really think about it. The bed in my vehicle is far more comfortable now, so than what I have in the room that I rent. So I mostly sleep in here. Let's see. But as far as freedom goes, do I feel more freedom? Well, I guess I'll have to answer that question. I'm going to have to say no right now, but I'll have to answer that more when, like, I cut the rent cord, if you will. Let's see. The Greater Bilby says, I like the idea of your alcohol burning fireplace. Let me tell you something. It's much, much, much different from having a catalytic heater of some sort, which most propane heaters are catalytic. Basically, the way that catalytic heat works is that it only heats up the air that is in front of you. It doesn't actually heat up your vehicle otherwise, and it's a moist heat, so a lot of people find it uncomfortable. The nice thing about a fireplace or an alcohol burning heater of sorts, basically an alcohol burning fireplace, is it's a dry heat, and it actually does heat up the area. Once you turn off like a My Buddy heater or something like that, or Mr. Buddy heater, there's no more heat. That's it. And it dissipates very quickly. At least that's my experience. I could be incorrectly. Anti-conformism. Yes, Katie Carney is spelled that way, not the way that I spelled it. You are correct. Sorry about that. I was trying to just get that in there as quickly as I possibly could. My Johnson says, I use a TV, laptop, iPhone, Wi-Fi extender. I have 300 watts of solar and wish I had more. You know what? I think 300 watts is probably overkill depending on where you live. But if you live in an area much like I do, 300 watts worth of solar panels is probably not sufficient, especially considering the fact that we don't get a lot of sun here in the Pacific Northwest. But yeah, I don't have a TV right now that I use. I don't like iPhones, but that's just me personally. Something about, I don't even want to get into why. I mean, I might eventually change my mind. You never know. Let's see. And apparently Follow Summer has a channel. I'll have to check that out a little bit later on. Follow Summer says, yes, I have seen one of Katie Carney's videos before. Sometimes I don't know if a channel is real. I see what you mean. As far as legitimacy, genuineness and whatnot, I totally get that. Yeah, I question that at times too. But then again, considering the fact that I am not a perfect human being myself, I can't really put too much in the aspect of pointing out a speck in someone's eye when I have a log of my own at times. And that's not to say that I'm not genuine, but sometimes I fall astray, if you will. But yeah. And let's see here. The Greater Bilby asks, so if you wanted to watch a TV, you'd need solar, right? I think that depends on the size of the TV. If you have, as long as you have a way to charge your batteries, that's really what counts. And depending on how long you go without, like, for example, the only way that I can charge my batteries is when I'm running, when my vehicle's running. For my needs, as of right now, that's more than enough. But if I were to be sitting on one spot for 2 or 3 days and not running my vehicle at all, I would probably need solar at that point, because let me tell you, the batteries last quite a while, but not that long. But so it really just depends on your TV usage, the size of the TV, how much energy it takes, all that kind of stuff. Hey Martha, thank you for joining in. I'm very glad that you're able to make it. I always enjoy, just like everybody else, I always enjoy your participation. Hello, Mary. Glad to have you here as well. Follow Summer says, nothing much of my channel. I mentioned that she has a YouTube channel because I didn't know. Nothing much on my channel. I have videos, but no van videos or anything. Well, you can always change that. It's up to you. When you have the opportunity, or if you have the opportunity. Gypsy says, I have a tiny channel as well. Follow Summer. just starting out. You got to start somewhere. So you know, I'll just say, check out Gypsy's channel. You can subscribe or not subscribe, but the more that we support each other, the better, the more success that we will all have together. And that's the whole idea of having a YouTube community in the first place, is to be able to support one another and to encourage one another. So, yeah. Jenny asks, how much do you foresee it costing you a month to live in your van as opposed to renting? Well, if I don't have rent, I won't be spending, well, I mean, I pay cheap rent now, so I can only attribute that cheap rent so much. But even saving $600 a month is rather nice. I probably spend, and I haven't really paid much attention to it because I always have money left over after every month. But to be able to do whatever with, such as, buying goodies like this, or, giving money away or whatever. But it's still $600. I mean, that's just money that I've been spending for the last however long I've been living in my one bedroom. But for most people, that'd be like $1,200, and that's if I were to just be in here full time, I would probably be looking at, I don't know, probably around my lifestyle as of right now, especially since I pay extra money for taking care of my back and whatnot, with chiropractic and other means, like doing eventually hot yoga again, which is very expensive. I could probably see myself living for around $1,000, maybe $1,100 a month, which is considerably less than what I make. Yeah, that's probably what I'd be looking around, $1,100-$1,200 a month, which is a very comfortable lifestyle in my opinion. But then again, with a gallon of denatured alcohol at Lowe's is like $17 or $18, and it's easy to go through 1 gallon a week when it comes to heating up an alcohol fireplace. So I haven't calculated that in. I mean, that's you might even be able to go through 2 of these a week if that's so. That's probably the same amount as a heat bill in the wintertime. Actually, I've heard of heat bills being upwards of $200 or $300 just to heat a 1-bedroom apartment. So even if you were to go through 3 of these a week, you'd still be saving money on heat alone. But yeah. Let's see. Sam Finn says, what is the brand of your alcohol fireplace so I can Google it? Never heard of one before. I'll show you what it is. Honestly, I don't remember the name brand, but I upgraded. And this one, I think it costed like $100, $120, something like that. It might have only been $70, but I think it was like around $100. I don't remember, honestly, because it was several weeks ago that I got it. But this is what it looks like. And the nice thing about this one is you can actually, if I can show you, you can actually adjust how big the flame is. And you just pour the denatured alcohol in here, or they actually recommend their fluid for whatever reason. Maybe it burns ever so slightly cleaner. I really doubt it, because denatured alcohol is a very clean burning fuel. But you can get, the cool thing is you can get with their product, with their liquids, you can actually get different colored flames because they mix them with different chemicals that are still really clean, but not quite as clean as pure denatured alcohol, I would argue. But what do I know? I'm not a chemist. But you can get different colors of flames, which is pretty neat. With denatured alcohol, you get a blue flame. Every now and then you get a spark of yellowish orange, but it's mostly blue flame, which I like blue, so it works out for me. Especially if you wanted to change the color of your lighting to like a yellow, and then suddenly you can get yourself almost a green atmosphere. Sometimes, not always, but yeah. So that's something to look into. I got it off of Amazon. So all you have to do is look up alcohol fireplace in Amazon, and you get a slew of options. So if you don't need something quite this big, which most smaller vans than this particular monster here is, could probably do a smaller fireplace like the $40 ones or whatever. So, but just something to show you. And let's see, going back to live chat here. Oh, wrong one. Wrong scroll. There we go. The Greater Bilby says, you can always film what you see, but not show yourself. Film the countryside as you go along the road. That's very true. You can do that. I'm assuming that's a suggestion for Follow Summer. Let's see. Ford Van Man says, Follow Summer. I have been on YouTube for almost 2 years and still don't show my face. And he's definitely telling the truth. I don't know what he looks like. I don't even know what his name is, and it's not my business to know. But you know, he's a very secretive person. Anyway, My Johnson says, if you want to see a sweet van setup, check out the video on the Camper Van Kevin channel today. I haven't seen it yet, but he's done some really cool setups in the past. One of my favorites was the Bertha that's what Eric from Nomadic Fanatic called the van that Kevin gave him. And that's probably one of my favorite setups because it was just gorgeous. I mean, it was all raw plywood for the most part, but it was a gorgeous setup. I could only imagine staining it a really nice light brown, like almost completely transparent brown stain, just enough to bring out the grain a little bit more, and then putting a clear coat over it would have looked incredible. But he does some great craftsmanship. So very talented man. Let's see, my Greater Bilby. Uh-oh, I went too far. I do that on occasion. The Greater Bilby says, my first YouTube experience was looking for a video on a road trip around the area where my family originally came from in Bergoring. I could be pronouncing that incorrectly. Bergoring Valley, because I'd only ever seen old pictures of it. Let's see, and then, oh yeah, and apparently, because I didn't know this, I don't know why I didn't know this, but I didn't. Deborah Joy's birthday is on the 11th, so everybody send her a private message wishing her a happy birthday. Not a command, but a friendly suggestion. Let's see. Uh-oh, did I go too far again? I probably did. My Johnson says, if you want to see a real car van RV dwelling, check out Bob Wells' channel. And that's true. He's got a great channel, very informative. So much information that he's given out in the past, especially with like cheap RV living and whatnot. I mean, the man is just a living well of information when it comes to the nomadic lifestyle. Let's see. Martha says, I saw that in Russia some put wood stoves where the front passenger seat was. I'm sorry, but I found that amusing. Then again, it is bitterly cold where they were, and that's true. I didn't know that they replaced their passenger seats with a wood-burning stove. Although I have seen it's becoming more and more common for a wood-burning stove to be in an RV. In fact, I plan on putting one in my vehicle after the winter, which may seem a little odd to do it after the winter, but I just want to take the winter off and take it easy and just enjoy living this style. And I'd much rather spend the time with all of you and make like little helpful suggestions that I discover as I go along with the process. So that's my goal anyway. We'll see how well it works. And let's see. The Greater Bilby says, I'll look into that regarding the fireplace. Would that be safe for camping? As long as you follow the instructions, like having following the safety parameters, like with a wood-burning stove, depending on the size, of course. If you get like the mini cube stove that you can have manufactured in Canada. I plan on getting one eventually. You have to have like 22 or 23 inches of space between any cabinet or wall or whatever. Basically, all around you want 23 inches of space or 22 inches of space, something like that, and a fire shield if you don't have that space available. And that's pretty much it. I mean, everything else is just learning how to use it properly and whatnot. But for the most part, they're actually relatively safe, and you can get wood almost anywhere. So it's also rather economical. It's the most economically safe way to heat your vehicle or any place, really. I don't believe in global warming, so I don't think that really plays an effect, and that's a conversation for another day. Let's see. Ford Van Man said, Deborah is the only tuber that knows what I look like. Well, meh. I'm kidding. I'm not bothered at all by not knowing what he looks like. Let's see. Apparently, Bob has over 100,000 subscribers, and he deserves it. He definitely deserves it. Sam Finn said, thanks for the live stream. A pleasure as always. Night, everyone. Good night, Sam, and thank you for joining us tonight. And apparently, my buddy's going to be done around 8:30. I need to let him know that I'm already at taco time. Just because that's where I'm at, as I've mentioned a couple of times before. I'm in the parking lot of a taco time. I don't think I'll be staying here overnight, but because that would be very obvious what I'm doing, because they close at, I think, 9:30. But I might move over to my gym or someplace like that. I'm not sure yet. A couple of nights I was just parked in my work parking lot. The CEO of the company comes out as I'm getting out of my van. I think I was going to go use the restroom or something. And he's like, so how's the parking lot? I said, oh, it's a little chilly, but overall it's pretty good. He just kind of laughs and gets in his vehicle because he knows I park out there at a couple of nights a week. But it's just entertaining. All right. Let's see. Martha says good weather really helps with your working on your van anyway. It's helpful for working on anything really when it comes to carpentry, unless you have a big shop, which I do work in a big shop, but I don't like to use it simply because I know it inconveniences the shop. I mean, not at the times that I use it, but if I'm building a cabinet for my vehicle or whatever, I simply don't want to inconvenience them by using up any space that could have otherwise been stored for customer cabinets. Let's see. Follow Summer asks, have you ever been to an RTR? And no, I have not. And I'm considering. I don't know yet, but I'm considering going to the RTR this year in January, or not this year, but next year in January. This coming RTR, I should say. It really depends on. I mean, I've got the vacation time; I can use it. Even if I didn't have the vacation time, I could still go because I can afford not to work for a week. But it just really depends on what work looks like. I don't want to leave them with a slew of work and no way to make up the difference for me not being there. It's not fair for them, and I wouldn't want them to do it to me. So it just depends on what work looks like. Because if it's looking like the burden is low enough to where they can afford not to have me for a week, then I'll probably go. So let's see. Janine says, it is interesting where this conversion has gone. It seems that there are many of us who here who are finding freedom by living in a van. Well, it's freedom has different interpretations. I mean, I shouldn't say interpretations, but freedom has different functionalities, freedom has different aspects where it can be applied, and where one recognizes that application is a great discovering point. Let's see. I want to say hello to Lisa because it's been a couple of it's been a little while since you've joined one of the live chats. Of course, this one I didn't even really give notice. The only thing that I can really say is that it's my goal to always be able to have a consistent Freedom Friday, and I try to have them between 5:30 and 6:30 start time. And go for an hour. The reason why I have been able to go on for the last hour and 50 minutes and almost an hour and 51 minutes, basically almost 2 hours, is because I'm still waiting on a friend of mine to meet up with. In fact, I was hoping he'd be able to join in on this Freedom Friday discussion, but maybe next week, because I think he'd be able to add quite a bit to the conversation. And spark more. He could probably probe my mind quite a bit too, because he knows a little bit on how I think. Probably because he thinks a lot the same way that I do. Let's see. My John says, to be honest, the average life cycle of a full-time van RV dweller is about 3 and 5 years. Some longer, some shorter. Yeah, there's some people that have done it for like 17 years. Like I think Justin Credible has done it for 17 years now or something. But I guess he's also mentioned that he's taken breaks from it. So you might be right about that. I don't really have a reference myself because I'm still basically just starting out. But you could be correct. My Justin also says it isn't for everybody because of the loneliness and the pain and the arse. Moving all the time. Arse. And that's probably right. I don't necessarily struggle with loneliness. I guess you could say that whenever I'm lonely, I try to just dwell on the Lord. Sometimes I'm better at it than other times. Meditation is really good for loneliness. I don't know if you really have to be an introvert. I think it can help to be an introvert, but I don't think it's an absolute requirement. I kind of swing both ways as far as being an introvert or an extrovert. I think it just really depends on my mood. Let's see. Yeah, but Lisa says, howdy, I keep missing you. New York hours, sigh. Yeah, 3-hour difference makes it's quite a difference, unfortunately, especially if you're a morning person like I have to force myself to be, but not on a Friday night, let me tell you. And I have to agree with the greater Bilby. It's great that you cut the live stream, so thanks a lot for that. Janine asks a rather important question, one that I don't know if I have an absolute answer to, and that is, do you plan to do this for the rest of your life? And I don't know if I plan on doing this the rest of my life. I mean, it's really hard to say because I'm just starting out. But I do plan on definitely being more minimalistic for the rest of my life because possessions have buried me, not freed me. And I think that happens to everybody. And there's just a certain amount that I think everybody recognizes it differently, unfortunately. Martha says, I don't think I could live in a vehicle again at this point. I lived in my 71 Torino for a couple summers in the 90s. Well, as it was brilliantly stated many times already, nomadic lifestyle of any sort is not necessarily for everybody. But the fact that you did it is props to you. I mean, you did it. So, Follow Summer says, Bob Wells talks about living away from cities and it changing you so much that cities will stress you out. Again, I look at any sort of living situation much like I look at traffic. It's really what you do with it, how you apply it. I don't mind heavy traffic. I mean, when I do drive home from work or drive south, I should say, because I do have responsibilities down and about the city where I used to live full time. When I do have to drive down south, I typically fight about an hour and a half to 2 hours of traffic, and I've just learned that there's nothing I can do about the traffic. It's going to be there whether I want it to be or not. I work on my feet not 8, 9, 10, 11 hours a day, and it's just an opportunity to relax and sit down, relax, and simply take it easy. All I have to do is make sure that I coast with the rest of the traffic. I could stress out about it, but it's just not worth it. So, my John says, just incredible. Also parks at his buddy's house and plugs into their house power. Yeah, you might be right. I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen him do it. I know he's mentioned that he does it on occasion. I don't know how much he actually does it. But, I mean, if it's available, why not? I don't see anything wrong with that. If they're offering, by all means. I mean, I've got friends that have offered to let me plug in as long as I have an extension cord, but I really don't need to. And quite frankly, there are some friends that I have that, seeing them every once in a while is okay, but doing it on a regular basis, no thank you. Oh, did I read? Apparently, I read Lisa's message incorrectly. She said New work hours, not New York hours. So my apologies. I was going to say, wait a second. I thought she lived just north of me. But, yeah. Apparently, keep in mind, there are some people that know this already. I scratched to the cornea of my right eye not too long ago. Just a week and a half ago or something like that. So I think I can put a contact in my right eye again. But so if I read something incorrectly, it's probably because it's blurry in one eye and crystal clear in the other eye. And I usually can dismiss the blurriness for the most part and focus away from it. But sometimes I'll still read something incorrectly. So my apologies. Not that I really had to apologize because I know you're not bothered by it that much. See, Lisa C. also says, though, aside from having to scold me for reading her message incorrectly, is I can't wait to get out there on the road and meet more people who think like me, find my tribe, so to speak. Yeah, and I can't wait for you to do it either. By the way, I haven't forgotten about the answering your call for, or your request for knowing the fuel cost for my road trip. I still do plan on getting to that. I have another video that hopefully will be uploaded tomorrow regarding, dude, where's my van? So look forward to that. Let's see. The Greater Bilby said, that'd be great to have access to power every now and then. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with getting free power. I mean, even if you have to pay $5 for like a night's worth of power, I mean, totally worth it. Totally worth it, especially if you can charge up all your batteries, because solar doesn't always charge them up completely if you live in the Pacific Northwest. Janine says, I know that living this life will allow me to so much, I think, to do so much more into the foundation and give others. She has Janine has a nonprofit organization called the Hope Foundation. I think it's the hopefoundation.org or something like that. So, worthy cause. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to do two things at once, and I can't walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. And much appreciated for those of you who have given me best wishes on my eye healing. It has, for the most part. I can tell still. Yeah, it's got a teeny tiny little scratch left. I mean, it's not much. I could probably put a contact in now, but that's I can wait another couple of days. See, Lisa says, sorry, I'm way out of date with your news. Are you completely out of your home now? Full time in the van? Woohoo! Well, as you can probably kind of see, maybe you can't. I'm in a parking lot right now. I'm not full-time. I'm like 4 or 5 days a week, something like that. I'm almost full-time. I consider myself almost full-time at this point. I'm just trying to get things settled in, trying to figure out where I want to put everything, because there's quite a few boxes, and I'm just trying to fit it. And I'm not exactly very adamant about doing it quickly. There's just, I wish I got things done as quickly as I wanted to, but I'm almost full-time. So, close enough. Well, not close enough, but I'm happy with the progression that I'm going with it. Let's see. And I don't know where my buddy's at yet, but I think he's going to be here soon. So I'm going to go ahead and end it here. I want to thank each and every one of you for participating. Just a little over 2 hours now, even though I know some of you were not able to see the whole thing. Again, my goal is to have this happen each Friday, Freedom Friday. And I didn't really prep for this one as much as I would normally try to. I usually try to have a topic at hand, much like it was a little bit better organized last time than this time. But it still turned out to be a great discussion anyway. And that's one of the great things about being able to interact with all of you, is even if I'm not completely prepared, all of you will keep me busy anyway. So thank you all for joining in. Freedom Friday, I'm always going to try to have it start sometime between 5:30 and 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for East Coast time. That's obviously between 8:30 and 9:30 p.m. So, yeah. Yes, Elise asked if she spelled my name correctly, and yes, you did. That's the only way to spell my name if you were to ask me, in my opinion. But my opinion is only like that worthy. So, again, thank you all for joining in. I greatly appreciate it. I'm going to try to keep this live chat up a little bit longer, so that way all of you can converse a little bit longer. But thanks again, everybody, for watching in. The average view duration is over 15 and a half minutes, so that's fantastic. And all of you are the direct cause of that. So thank you again, everybody. And have a great evening. Take care. Love others as you love yourself, and I'll see you next time.